Hi everyone, today I'll be discussing the 1936 article What is Modern Music by Alan Bush. This question has surely been pondered by every musicologist alive ever in relation to their modern era, but Bush's approach to how we define modern music differs from many of his peers at the time due to his unique philosophical and political framework. This paper was published as a part of Proceedings of the Musical Association in 1936, and the Royal Musical Association would have facilitated a discussion on this work alongside other articles published from this session. Bush was a highly respected musicologist and lecturer from this association, so this particular article would have held weight amongst his peers. I think we firstly need to get into Bush's mindset with a quote from the text. The complete failure of musical criticism or aesthetics to establish any kind of standard other than the subjective reaction of the individual to the particular piece is openly admitted and praised as intellectual honesty instead of being acknowledged as the flippant irresponsibility that it is. Bush begins to examine how we got to where we are now, when I say now, I mean 1936, by engaging in historical review regarding the development of Western art music, from the early organum and descant in the medieval era through to mensural notation and the return of the homophonic texture in the 17th and 18th centuries. He describes various musical phases that come in and out of fashion throughout history. One of the main issues in musicology during this time was the formalism and modernism debate. Bush references Heinrich Schenker's argument that true music is based on certain classical rules, and therefore music after Brahms is not actually music. Schenker's book Free Composition, published in 1935, is foundational for the formalist. Going back to the older notation, I've actually got here Strict Counterpoint in Palestrina Style, which was published by Alan Bush, so it really shows he's a big Palestrina fan. But how can we hold on to tonality while also utilizing all 12 chromatic notes? Bush claims that Schoenberg was able to resolve this matter by instead harnessing atonality through the 12-tone row. His argument here is that the usage of atonality instead of the major and minor is influenced by the ecclesiastical modes, in which the constructed series of intervals were more common, and in other cases influenced by the national folk songs of the composer in question. This demonstrates how Bush's aesthetic considerations are extremely structured and shows his belief in an objective criteria for music grounded in progressiveness in society. To Bush, modern music is defined as a period in development which is based on scales other than major or minor and polyphonic rather than harmonic. Bush's humanistic and Marxist theory may be best demonstrated through the following quote. Art as a social product must have a social and not an antisocial aim. It must help to increase the life of mankind and not subserve the interests of those who would sacrifice life to material gain. Something that Bush does really well is the subtle integration of his Marxist beliefs throughout the text. Although he very overtly at the end states that music became a commodity in Tudor England and romanticism in music is an escape from the abysmal conditions inflicted on the working class by the bourgeoisie, the Marxist theory is not all obvious. To me, Bush's emphasis of music as a social product linked to the social and economic conditions of the time is aligned with the base and superstructure theory in Marxist cultural theory. Although Marx did not write on the aesthetics of music, he valued music as a serious labor that is social in nature and requires material conditions to be fully developed. Another part of my critical reading of this text is globalism. This is definitely more of the case now than in the 1930s, but modern music, even during that time, I feel it was potentially too broad to claim that there is definitely a singular style called modern music in development that is polyphonic and less reliant on tonality. The global music culture will also not necessarily recognize 1930s European modernism as quote unquote modern music. And this is the case with the music of each global working class additionally. Bush actually discovered this himself later when composing his opera The Sugar Reapers in British Guinea. I think that Bush, as a lifelong Stalinist, may not have effectively paid attention to international music cultures at this point in his career. The immediate goal for Stalinism is revolution in one country, while the immediate goal for a Trotskyist such as Tippett is international revolution with less of a focus on nationalism. This article is really valuable to musicologists today as it shows a man who is extremely rational and controlled in his belief that modernism was truly the modern music of this time. There was no room for subjectivities, which, while I think 90 years later in 2026 would not exactly hold up well in debate, it demonstrates that we can advocate for the avant-garde without relying on the crutch of personal preference. Additionally, Bush as an avid defender of Schoenberg is interesting in retrospect due to the nature of Schoenberg's music being controversial and even unpopular amongst audiences. Critics such as Schenker previously mentioned would have defined his music as not music at all, so Bush being able to push his progressive position on music while maintaining a rational reason behind it was very influential. Thank you for listening to my presentation and I look forward to our discussion.